run prisons or different aspects of incarceration or detention. And so the overview is that the states have quite varied uses of privatization. Just like states are all different. Every state makes their own criminal justice policy. They decide what's illegal, how long you're going to go, how much to spend on prisons, and all the rest. So total, there are about 130 private prisons in the U.S., 157,000 beds. 17 states don't have private prisons at all, and you are one of them. Yay for Iowa, right? By contrast, New Mexico has the highest rate at a little over 40% of their state prisoners are held in privately operated facilities.
But we ship them to Missouri that has it.
Does Iowa do that?
I believe so, unless they stop. Yeah.
Yeah, we get a lot of folks in Arizona. The feds, at least in terms of immigrant detention, love privatization because like 49% of our immigration detention beds are in privately operated facilities. Huge. 7 to 8% of federal prison beds, the Federal Bureau of Prison, are privatized. I think that actually, that number, this may be a little bit old, I think that number may have increased actually since I got this. That gives you an idea of how it plays out. So in looking at the issue of immigration, as I mentioned earlier, it very often is a totally separate conversation from mass incarceration. And I think that's a mistake, right? They're very different populations. It's a very different mechanism. You got the federal government versus state governments. But to me, the central mechanism is about criminalization. It's this concept of when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? We have one size fits all solution to social problems in this country, and it is to penalize them, right? To criminalize, to outlaw, to make illegal. We don't like that. Do not do it, or else. That's like, imagine if you talk to your kids that way, right? So, again, back in the 30s, whatever, drug addiction was not a crime. But now it is. That's because we created laws that made it so. Mental illness, right? Those are policies that force people into a system where they don't belong. In many cases, poverty, right? We're not considering the root causes. If you steal food to feed your kids, we don't care. You stole the food, and that's bad, and that's illegal. And I think that really immigration is just kind of the next step in this process, right? Immigration, being in the United States without the proper paperwork, is a civil infraction in most cases, right? It's like if you didn't register your car or didn't have insurance. But increasingly, because of the rhetoric in this country around immigration, it's all catch and release, and people aren't learning their lesson and they're coming back, and now there's all this rhetoric of fear and distrust, and slowly this image of immigrant as criminal is transmitted to the public, and suddenly that is our solution to our immigration crisis, is to criminalize that behavior. It also very often comes back to this individual versus collective responsibility. You cross the border, you're not supposed to cross the border, don't do it, it's bad. Right? Instead of, oh, there's a civil war in your country. Perhaps you don't want your children to be shot before your very eyes. Right? There's no consideration of the social factors, the motivation, the root causes of the behavior. It's just punish the behavior because we own it. So immigrant detention has ballooned in this country. So now we have about 400,000 people in custody somewhere. This is actually 2012, in about 250 facilities. And again, these are folks who've gotten picked up and they are pending a hearing to sort out their paperwork, right? They may be individuals who are seeking asylum in this country and say, please let me stay. I fear for my life. I'm going to return to my home country. Or they're just sitting there for possibly years just waiting to get deported. So here's a very similar graph to the one that we looked at earlier. It doesn't go back as far. But certainly I think it would show a similar trajectory if it did. So here's our detained population going up as this rhetoric says we gotta do something about this immigration problem. We'll teach those folks, we have to deter them from crossing again. If we make things tough, they won't want to come back. Did I mention how much that costs? It costs a lot to try to incarcerate immigration. So here's our federal budget is about 1.84 billion with a B. This is in 14 for detention, right? That's $159 per detainee per day.
We could send them all on a cruise for that.
It's a big chunk of change, right?
Do those figures also include people who are natural born citizens but who happen to be undocumented? They could get swept up in the system too.
Yeah, and actually it does not, because this is detention and that is immigration, incarceration, right? If you commit some sort of felony offense, and you have a green card, you're gonna go to prison, serve your time, and then get deported. And in many cases, you are going to generate profit for a corporation while you sit there, and we'll get to that next. But the other thing that I want to be sure to mention, because this statistic is just startling to me, is federal spending on immigration enforcement now surpasses all other federal law enforcement combined. The FBI, the DEA, the Secret Service, the U.S. Marshals, ATF, all of them combined. And as I mentioned, half of those beds are run by private corporations. So here's your breakdown. Still the main players corporate-wise are Corrections Corporation of America, that's the largest private prison company in the U.S.,